Hello everyone, I am Mr. Ishitu Tasfai, your biology teacher. This is grade 11 biology, week 15. The lesson for this week will be the reproductive system, your textbook page 988 to 994. Objectives of the lesson. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the effect of the sex hormones have on development, name and discuss the structures of the male reproductive system, name and discuss the structures of the female reproductive system, and finally describe some of the most common sexually transmitted diseases. Let's begin with the first section of this lesson, which is sexual development. What effects do estrogen and testosterone have on females and males? In girls, the effects of the sex hormones include breast development and a widening of the hips, while in boys they result in the growth of facial hair, increased muscular development, and deepening of the voice. During the 7th week of development, male and female embryos start to develop differently. The male pattern of development is triggered by the production of testosterone in the embryo's gonads. In female embryos, testosterone is absent and the female reproductive system develops under the influence of estrogens produced in the gonads. Estrogens and testosterone are steroid hormones primarily produced in the gonads. In addition to shaping the sexual development of the embryo, these hormones act on cells and tissues to produce many of the physical characteristics associated with males and females. Puberty is a period of rapid growth and sexual maturation during which the reproductive system becomes fully functional. Puberty actually begins in the brain when the hypothalamus signals the pituitary to produce hormones that affect the gonads. These hormones are follicular stimulating hormone FSH and luteinizing hormone LH. The male reproductive system. What are the main functions of the male reproductive system? When puberty is complete, the reproductive system is fully functional, meaning that the male can produce and release active sperm. The release of luteinizing hormone stimulates cells in the testes to produce increased amounts of testosterone. Testosterone causes the physical changes in males associated with puberty, such as facial hair, increased muscular development, and deepening of voice. Testosterone and follicle stimulating hormone stimulate the development of sperm. Just before birth or just after, the testes, the primary male reproductive organs, descend from the abdomen into an external sac called the scrotum. The temperature in the scrotum is a few degrees lower than the normal body temperature. The lower temperature is important for sperm development. Please study the front view and the side view of the male reproductive organs on this diagram. Sperm development. Within each testis are clusters of hundreds of tiny tubules called seminiferous tubules where sperm develop. Specialized diploid cells within the tubules undergo meiosis and form the haploid nuclei of matured sperm. After they are produced in the seminiferous tubules, sperm are moved into the epididymis, in which they mature and are stored. From the epididymis, some sperm are moved into a tube called the vas deferens. The vas deferens extends upward from the scrotum into the abdominal cavity and eventually merges with the urethra, the tube that leads to the outside of the body through the penis. Glands lining the reproductive tract, including the seminal vesicles, the prostate, and the bulbourethral glands, produce nutrient-rich fluid called seminal fluid. And this seminal fluid nourishes the sperm and protects them from the acidity of the female reproductive tract. The combination of sperm and seminal fluid is known as semen. Between 50 million and 130 million sperm are present in 1 millimeter of semen, about 2.5 million sperm per drop. Sperm release. When the male is sexually aroused, the autonomic nervous system prepares the male organs to deliver sperm. The penis becomes erect and sperm are ejected from the penis by the contractions of smooth muscles lining the glands in the reproductive tract. This process is called ejaculation. About 2 to 6 millimeters of semen are released in an average ejaculation. Let's see a sperm structure. A mature sperm cell consists of three parts, namely a head which contains a highly condensed nucleus, second, a midpiece which is packed with energy-releasing mitochondria, and finally a tail or flagellum which propels the cell forward. At the tip of the head is a small cap containing enzymes vital for fertilization. This is the structure of a human sperm cell containing three main body parts: the head containing the nucleus, the midpiece made up of many mitochondria producing energy, and finally the tail, which is usually used for locomotion. Now let's move on to the female reproductive system. What are the main functions of the female reproductive system? The main functions of the female reproductive system is to produce egg cells or ova, singular ovum, and it's also nourish a developing embryo. The primary reproductive organs of the female are the ovaries, the gonads. Puberty in females starts when the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland to release follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicular stimulating hormone stimulates cells within the ovaries to produce increased amount of estrogens and to start producing egg cells. At puberty, each ovary contains up to 400,000 primary follicles. The follicles help an egg mature for release into the reproductive tract. About 400 eggs are released in a woman's lifetime. The diagram here shows the structure of the female reproductive tract. Please identify the structures. Here you have the front view and the side view of the female reproductive system. The menstrual cycle. Normally, one ovary usually produces and releases one mature ovum every 28 days or so. The process of egg formation and release occurs as part of the menstrual cycle, a regular sequence of events involving the ovaries, the lining of the uterus, and the endocrine system. The menstrual cycle is regulated by hormones made by the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and ovaries. It is controlled by internal feedback mechanisms. During the menstrual cycle, an egg develops within a follicle and is released from an ovary. In addition, the uterus is prepared to receive a fertilized egg. If an egg is not fertilized, it is discharged along with the lining of the uterus. This is what we call it menstruation. If an egg is fertilized, embryonic development begins and the menstrual cycle ceases. The menstrual cycle includes the follicular phase, ovulation, luteal phase, and menstruation. Let's look at the phases of menstruation one after the other. The first one is follicular phase. On day 1 of the menstrual cycle, blood estrogen levels are low. The hypothalamus then secretes releasing hormone that stimulates the anterior pituitary to secrete FSH and LH. These two hormones travel to the ovaries where they cause a follicle to mature. As you can see in this chart, which is section of the menstrual cycle, on the first day of the menstrual cycle, you see the level of estrogen is very low. The blue line is very low. It indicates the level of estrogen on day 1. But gradually, the level of estrogen is increasing because of the release of follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Alongside this, there is development of the follicle. Okay, the follicle develops. As you can see, there is enlargement in size as days go on. As the follicle develops, the cells surrounding the egg enlarge and begin to produce increased amount of estrogen. The estrogen level in the blood rises dramatically. High blood estrogen levels cause the hypothalamus to produce less releasing hormone and the pituitary release less LH and FSH. Estrogens also cause the lining of the uterus to thicken in preparation for receiving a fertilized egg. The development of an egg during this phase takes 10 days. Now to the second phase of menstrual cycle, ovulation. As the follicle grows, it releases more and more estrogens. When the concentration of these hormones reach a certain level, the hypothalamus reacts by triggering a burst of LH and FSH from the anterior pituitary. The sudden increase in these hormones causes the follicle to rupture, resulting in the process of ovulation, which is the release of an egg from the ovary into one of the fallopian tubes or the oviduct. The egg is then drawn into the fallopian tube. Microscopic cilia push the cell toward the uterus. Okay, now to the third phase of menstrual cycle, which is the luteal phase. As the egg moves through the fallopian tube, the ruptured follicle turns yellow, now known as the corpus luteum, which means the yellow body in Latin. As you can see in this section of the menstrual cycle, the ruptured follicle now turns to the corpus luteum, and this corpus luteum will act as the endocrine gland secreting hormones. The corpus luteum continues to release estrogen and begins to release progesterone, which stimulates the growth and development of the blood supply and the surrounding tissue in the uterine lining. The rise in these hormones inhibits the production of FSH and LH, preventing the development of additional follicles during. Unless fertilization occurs and an embryo starts to develop, the fall of LH levels leads to the degeneration of the corpus luteum. As you can see, the corpus luteum gradually degenerates. Estrogen levels fall. The hypothalamus signals the release of follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary, and the follicular phase begins again. Menstruation. At the start of the new follicular phase, low estrogen levels cause the lining of the uterus to detach from the uterine wall. This tissue, along with blood and the unfertilized egg, are discharged through the vagina during a phase called menstruation. The menstrual cycle continues on average until a female is in her late 40s to early 50s, at which point the production of estrogen declines and ovulation and menstruation stop. The permanent stopping of the menstrual cycle is called menopause. Pregnancy. The menstrual cycle ceases if a woman becomes pregnant. During the first 2 days of the luteal phase, immediately following ovulation, the chances that an egg will be fertilized are the greatest. This is usually from 10 to 14 days after the completion of the last menstrual cycle. If a sperm fertilizes an egg, the fertilized egg completes meiosis and immediately undergoes mitosis. After several divisions, mitotic divisions, a ball of cells will form and implant itself in the lining of the uterus wall, which we call it implantation. The uterus and embryo begin to release hormones that keep the corpus luteum functioning for several weeks. This prevents the menstrual cycle from starting again. Now let's look at the last section of this lesson, which is sexually transmitted diseases, abbreviated as STDs. What are some of the most commonly reported sexually transmitted diseases? Chlamydia is not only the most common bacterial STD, it is the most commonly reported bacterial disease in the United States. Chlamydia damages the reproductive tract and can lead to infertility. Viral STDs include hepatitis B, genital herpes, genital warts, and AIDS. Diseases that are spread by sexual contact are known as sexually transmitted diseases, abbreviated as STDs. Viral STDs include hepatitis B, genital herpes, genital warts, and AIDS. Unlike the bacterial STDs, viral infections cannot be treated with antibiotics. Some viral STDs, such as AIDS, can be very fatal. Several strains of the virus that causes genital warts, human papillomavirus (HPV), are a major cause of cervical cancer in women. Recently, a vaccine has been developed that can prevent HPV infection. STDs can be avoided. The safest course to follow is to abstain from sexual contact before marriage, and for both partners in a committed relationship to remain faithful. The next safest course is to use a latex condom, but even condoms do not provide 100% protection.